Meeting to order. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, on March 29th, 2023, Governor Maura Healey signed into law an act making appropriations for the fiscal year 2023 to provide for supplementing certain existing appropriations and for certain other activities and projects. This act includes an extension until March 31st, 2025 of the remote meeting provisions. The May 8th, 2023 Select Board meeting will be conducted by a remote participation by the board, and I am going to grant participation or permission to Westwood Media Center to record the meeting and ask, is there anyone else wishing to record the meeting? Seeing none, I'm going to jump into the chair's update. I'm going to start with a reminder that the Canton Street Sidewalk project, we have a public outreach meeting scheduled for May 16th. At the May 2nd, 2022 annual town meeting, residents approved a warrant article, which was Article 12, to appropriate funds to pay the costs of design services related to the Canton Street Sidewalk project. Department of Public Works and the Engineering Corp will hold an in-person session at the Westwood Main Library in the community room on May 16th at 6 p.m. to provide an update on the Canton Street Sidewalk project. And next, I'm going to move to Memorial Day, and let's hope that we have weather that reflects this past weekend, as we will be holding our annual Memorial Day parade on May 29th, starting at 10 a.m. The parade begins at Westwood Town Hall and will proceed down Route 109 High Street to the new Westwood Cemetery, where a Memorial Day ceremony will be held. Town staff and volunteers will be busy replacing flags and planting flowers on all the veterans' graves in the new cemetery and old cemetery the week before Memorial Day. If anyone would like to volunteer to replace flags or plant flowers, please send an email to volunteers@townhall.westwood.ma.us, and town staff will respond with more information. And more information regarding the parade and the ceremony will be posted on the town website over the next few weeks. Next up, I'm going to ask that Chris and Pat give us a little background on an update with respect to the multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA communities following a discussion with the Lieutenant Governor. So, gentlemen, which one of you wants to take the lead on that?
Chris, you want me to take this?
Sure.
So last about a week previous, Chris and I had a couple phone calls with the Lieutenant Governor, and she set up a meeting with representatives from her office, representatives from the governor's office, representatives from DHCD, and we discussed the situation involving our MBTA, multifamily zoning around MBTA stations. I think it was a productive discussion, and I think there's more work to follow in the coming weeks to see if we can't get on the same page. We let them know about the area we've zoned and the fact that we actually have someone interested in perhaps doing a project. They were happy to hear about potential units, but I think we have additional work to at least consider and work through the process.
Thank you, sir. And
Chris,
then,
you got anything you want to add?
No, Pat, I think you covered everything. Would certainly like to say, appreciate Lieutenant Governor reaching out to us, having that conversation and making her team available to us for that conversation. And like Pat said, we will certainly have more for the board at one of your future meetings.
very good. Thank you both. Okay, next up is a status update on the Firefighters Association Local 1994 IAFF with respect to the union negotiations. The collective bargaining agreement between the town and the Westwood Permanent Firefighters Association Local 1994 IAFF expired on June 30th, 2021. The union filed for mediation at the Joint Labor Management Committee, also known as the JLMC, in December 2022. And the parties are actively participating in the mediation process. Since last Monday, annual town meeting, since last Monday afternoon, along with the mediators, the parties have spent numerous hours exchanging a number of proposals, and we are hopeful that the parties are close to reaching a tentative agreement that will soon be brought to the full membership for ratification. So Chris and Molly, I just want to thank you. I know how much time the two of you have been putting into this, and look forward to hoping seeing something in the next week or so. So that then takes us to scheduled action. And before I begin scheduled action, I just want to end the chair's update by welcoming our newest member, Mr. Joe Prepatera, who was elected a couple weeks ago. Welcome, Joe, and we look forward to your participation.
Thanks very much, Rob. I look forward as well, and I'm going to follow your cue.
There you go. All right.
Thank you very much.
So, as is tradition to begin the first meeting after town meeting, we appoint member to serve as the chair for next year. Further, we then appoint a member to serve as the clerk, who will sit in as chair if the chair is not available for a meeting or has to recuse him or herself. Finally, the remaining newly elected member is given the title of third member. By tradition, the member in their second year serves as chair, in the third year as clerk, and in the first year as third member. The chair serves as the principal contact for the administrative staff in the development of the agendas, discusses issues that may arise, including emergencies, and as the spokesperson for the board when the need arises at certain events like Memorial Day, Westwood Day, Veterans Day, etc. So, welcome, Joe, as the new member. And the standard practice is the first motion will be to nominate our incoming chair, Mary Ann LeBlanc Cummings, to serve as the chair for the upcoming year. Can I get such a motion?
So moved.
And I will second out of necessity. So roll call vote. Mr. Prepatera.
Yes.
Ms. LeBlanc Cummings.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Congratulations, Mary Ann. The second motion would be to nominate, I guess, me as clerk for the upcoming year. Can I get such a motion?
So moved. Sorry.
That sounded like that. And can I get a second?
Yes.
All right,
second
there
the
we go.
motion.
So we will begin with roll call vote. Mr. Prepatera,
Yes.
Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. And finally, one more time, congratulations, Joe, and we will nominate you to serve in the role of third member. So, Mary Ann, can I get such a motion?
So moved.
And I will second out of necessity. Mr. Prepatera,
Aye.
Ms. LeBlanc Cummings,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. And I will turn the baton to you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Rob. And I want to thank you also for your very strong leadership this year. And I promise that I will have a lot more to say about that at our next meeting. But thank you. And Joe, I also want to extend a very warm welcome to you. And I very much look forward to working with both of you in a very productive year, along with working with our whole team at Town Hall, led by Chris Coleman, and with all of our engaged residents who contribute to our good government. So, although our reorganization meeting is usually traditionally quite brief, we do have a number of important agenda items tonight. And the first is to review the select board meeting dates through December of 2023. We should also discuss whether we want to continue these meetings via Zoom or in person, and should discuss the start time for our meetings. With respect to the question of Zoom or in person, as a reminder, Governor Healy's order provides that remote participation meetings can be held through March of 2025. I do think that the general sentiment is that remote participation provides greater access for our residents to participate and attend our meetings. So my recommendation would be that we continue them. Does anyone disagree?
No, in fact, I prefer the flexibility that affords, for example, for tonight. So I think it actually expands the pool, not only of participants from the community, but also makes it a whole lot easier to broaden the pool of folks who will serve in roles.
I agree. So it sounds like we've got agreement on that. As to the start time of 6 p.m., I think that is also working in that it's far enough outside of the business day to allow folks to get to our meetings, but also allowing for the meetings not to extend too late into the evening. What do you folks think?
I think these have been working great. I have no problem whatsoever with the 6 o'clock start time. Joe?
I like to stay on a winning horse. I agree, Mary Ann.
Okay, great. And then looking at the dates, assuming you've both had an opportunity to look at the suggested schedule, any conflict with dates outside of July? Let's talk about the months except for July to start.
No, I didn't see any that looked to be a problem for me. No, I think as I rolled through, I was good with all dates.
Great. Joe, how are you looking?
Same for me.
Wonderful.
Funny that you put a hold on July, because that was one that was going to be a challenge for me on the 10th, on that typical Monday. So
Okay, well, let's get to that. I think we're looking at either July 10, 11, or 12. The 10th looks tough for you, Rob?
yeah, but the 11th or 12th can work fine.
Mary Ann, I want to make one point on
Yeah.
the 11th planning board is meeting on the 11th. So, and also I wanted to make a point that planning board is meeting on June 20th as well, which is one of our dates. So
just to remind the board, what happens with that is if our times overlap, what ends up happening is Westwood Media Center can only cover one live
Mhm.
and the other would be recorded. Yeah, when we've had situations like in the past, prior boards have either started a little bit earlier so there wouldn't be an overlap, or moved it to another day when it's not your traditional day of meeting.
Okay, well, sticking on the June date, would the 21st work? Tish and Chris, would that work for you?
Yeah, I'd certainly defer the board. If it works with the board, it certainly will work with me anyway.
Rob and Joe, how does the 21st of June look?
Looks
I
fine.
don't see any conflicts on my calendar.
Okay. And then going to July, how about July 12th? So we can avoid the conflict with the planning board. Does that look good?
That's fine by me.
perfect.
I'm
Joe?
sorry, July 12th, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Great. So I think we have our schedule through December, Tish. Great. All right. Well, moving right along.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, there's, Tish, if I'm not mistaken, October 10th, did we already change
Oh,
that?
that's right.
So October 10th, we would have another conflict with the planning board. October 10th is the day after Columbus Day, so it's a Tuesday evening.
Okay.
If the board is inclined and if you're available, if we follow what we've done with these other two dates, would Wednesday, October 11th work for the board?
I can make that work, certainly.
As can I. Joe?
Yes, for the 11th.
So we're good. So I'll get a new calendar out to everyone. The updated dates.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, we have an update on the Canton Street Sidewalk project. And do we have Todd with us?
Just brought him in.
We're going to bring in our DPW director, Todd Korchin, and I believe he will be joined by Jonathan Rockwell from TEC, the Engineering Corp. Hi, Todd. Welcome.
Good evening. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having us tonight.
Oh, thank you for being here. Let me just give a brief intro to you and welcome, Mr. Rockwell. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
As mentioned earlier tonight, there will be a public outreach meeting on the Canton Street Sidewalk project on May 16th at 6 p.m. at the library. And by the way, for my colleagues, I do plan to attend. So if either or both of you also plan to attend, please let Tish know so she can post that as a meeting. And by way of background, as Rob mentioned earlier, at our 2022 town meeting, residents approved a borrowing article for capital improvements for the funding of the sidewalk design for Canton Street. These design funds were necessary in order to obtain funding for the construction of the sidewalk project through the Massachusetts Transportation Improvement Program grant. The construction component of the project will be 100% funded through that TIP grant, although there may be some costs as to necessary easements to complete the project. And at this point, I'd love to turn it over to you, Todd and John, to provide us with an update, the proposed timeline, and next steps to secure the funding. So welcome, both of you.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, Marianne, that was a great summary of basically the process of which we've gone through thus far. An important note too is if you go back even before, prior to us obtaining the funding necessary to embark really on the design, it really kicked off about 3 years before that. Back, I want to say it was back in 2018, when the Top Golf development, which is now being constructed, I'm sure many people have seen. It's the old Cumberland Farms property in Canton. We were able to negotiate a $250,000 settlement to a degree. I wouldn't necessarily call it a settlement, but more or less mitigation money that the select board at the time voted through to embark on this Canton Street, survey, very preliminary design, kind of get us going to that point by which we then went in before town meeting last year and went after the remainder of the funding necessary to complete the design. Tonight, we're here not really to talk about the design itself, really the stages that we're at, that we're going to have to go through with respect to the state process. And I'll let Jonathan really just get into that right now. And if there's any other further questions, by all means, ask. We can dive into the weeds a little bit, but we're going to keep it pretty high level right now. And as low as you guys want to go, just let us know.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Todd. Thanks to the board and Madam Chair. So, I mean, I know Todd said we don't want to get too much into the design, but I think it would be helpful to start with a quick recap of the project scope. So the limits of the project are between the East Street Rotary and the intersection of University Ave and Dedham Street, which is about a 2-mile long corridor. The scope in general includes complete streets cross-section, really with the intent of improving safety, really for the most vulnerable users of the roadway, provide connectivity to nearby public transportation, commercial destinations, recreational opportunities. It'll consist of looking at a 5-foot sidewalk on the west side of the roadway and a 10-foot shared use path on the east side of the roadway. And that shared use path allows for both cyclists and pedestrians to travel in both directions on that wide path. Including high visibility pedestrian crossings, looking to replicate and improve the traffic calming measures that were implemented by the town back in, I think it was 2015. You'll recall the raised medians and some truck aprons at the intersections. Looking to do landscape and stone wall preservation in accordance with in conjunction with the project, given that Canton Street is a designated scenic roadway. Also be making utility upgrades, stormwater system, overhead relocations, water line replacement in conjunction with the Dedham Westwood Water District. And then finally, some pavement rehab. I know that the rest of the roadway is being overlaid now as sort of an interim measure, but I'll speak to the timeline later, which will make a little more sense relative to the work that's going on now. And overall, the construction cost estimate currently projected at about 18 million. So pretty substantial cost, but again, 2-mile full roadway reconstruction. Some of the project history and milestones to date, just touch on quickly. Way back in 2015, the project was originally approved by MassDOT's Project Review Committee, and that really makes it, at that point, initially eligible for federal and state funding. In 2019, TEC was authorized to perform a preliminary engineering and a feasibility study. May 2020 went through MassDOT's pre-25% design process, which really at that point nails down, defines what the typical roadway cross-section that we're going to be looking at and hoping to move forward with. We provided an update to this board in January 2021. March of 2021, we held the first public outreach meeting I know that the town leadership at the time was really hoping to have that meeting in person, so that sort of delayed it a little bit given the COVID pandemic. Ultimately decided to do a virtual meeting at that time. November of that year, MassDOT required that we go back to PRC, given the scope changes to the project, the increase in the project cost since it was initially projected back in 2015. In 2022, last February, we submitted a 25% design to MassDOT. And then as Madam Chair mentioned earlier, in May of last year, the town approved funding for next stages of design. And since that 25% submittal, we've really been working through comment resolution with MassDOT, refining some of the scope elements, particularly in the southern section of the roadway. There's a MassDOT-owned bridge over CSX rail spur just north of University Ave. We had initially proposed some modifications to that bridge to support the additional loading from the shared use path. Ultimately, the MassDOT bridge section decided that they didn't want to spend any dollars from their bridge program to improve that bridge. So they tasked us with looking at some alternatives to still provide the same functionality for bikes and peds across the bridge, but to not require any modifications to the bridge. I've been working through utility coordination since that time, and then again, I'm just trying to understand better understand the right-of-way impacts, as you alluded to earlier. So looking at next steps, you've already mentioned the next public meeting next week, Tuesday, 6 p.m. at the library. We now have endorsement from MassDOT on that project scope, particularly in the southern section related to the bridge. Late summer, we'd be looking to hold the formal MassDOT 25% design public hearing, and really waiting till after Labor Day with the goal of having more residents back from vacation at that time, trying to capture as much public input as possible with people being back from vacation. And then be looking at the next major design milestone would be a 75% design milestone, and be looking to make that to MassDOT this winter. And then the following spring is when we'd really begin the right-of-way process in earnest to acquire any necessary easements in conjunction with the project. There's a number of steps there: title exams, appraisals, town meeting approval, addressing any potential existing encroachments that MassDOT requires in order to secure that federal funding. The other key element that we've been working through kind of process in parallel to the design phase is trying to secure a spot to be programmed on the region's transportation improvement program. So as I mentioned, the PRC approval basically means the project is eligible to receive federal and state funding. But then we have to find a slot and lobby the Boston Region MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, in order to have them program us within a fiscally constrained year of their transportation improvement program. So we've been working through the last few months with DPW and the MPO, submitting a funding application to the MPO and working with them through various avenues to secure programming on the next tip cycle. So happy to report that the draft tip for FY 24 through 28 is now out for public comment, and the Canton Street project is included on that draft tip to be programmed in fiscal 2028 for funding. And finally, on June 1, the MPO will formally vote to endorse that tip with Canton Street programmed in FY 28. So good news there. And with that, sorry I got into a little too much detail perhaps, but happy to answer any other questions if you want to drill down into any of those aspects.
Thank you so much for all of that. One question I have for you, John, after the public hearing in late summer, what plans do you have for any further public comment in the process after that?
Yeah, so typically if we receive formal comments, either or if MassDOT receives formal comments prior to or during the hearing, we'll develop formal responses to those that will address individual abutters or other members of the public, address their concerns in writing. But between then and the 75% design submittal, there's no requirement for additional public outreach, but we'd certainly work with the board here and DPW if there was a desire to have another local public meeting at that stage. or engage the public in other types of meetings. I think a lot of public outreach happens once the right-of-way process is initiated through individual one-on-one meetings with the abutters oftentimes.
Great, thank you. Questions from my colleagues?
Sure, thank you, Mary Ann. I guess, Todd, when we first approved this, when we were taking it to town meeting, the 900,000, I think we had projected at the time, and this was all pre-COVID, that the cost was going to be that we were going to get roughly 11 or 12, somewhere in that range, $1 million from the state for this. And I think I just heard John say that that is now 18, projected to be 18.
That's right.
Wow. I'll tell you what, I'll take that return on investment every day.
Right. It makes it that much better, right?
Yeah. Okay.
It,
Thank you.
it's pretty, I mean, really, we've had some good conversations with representatives from Mass DOT, and it's going to be a challenging project, no doubt. I mean, the bigger the project, the more challenging it is. I mean, we're up for it. It's going to be a lengthy process. It's our goal, as with other previous projects, that we just make it as inclusive as possible. And Madam Chair, to answer your question, really, as many as it would take, just to make every abutter feel comfortable. And that's really how we roll. I mean, we went through a similar process with Gay Street. The difference with Gay Street is we actually at that time, the current select board decided to design it in a fashion that really wouldn't make it an eligible project to be funded by a Mass DOT program. So we went down that road, no pun intended, and designed it with one sidewalk, no shared use path. And that project currently sits. But the point of that project was it was done in a very tasteful, inclusive, transparent manner. You know, it's not a project that, God forbid, something happened out there that the select board, the town wanted to get an immediate sidewalk put out there. We currently have a design completed that it would be done in a tasteful way. It wouldn't just be asphalt rolled out because we reacted. So when we look at this project, it's a little different. It's a little unique, be it that it's not that a Gay Street cost estimate currently of, say, $7 million isn't a tough pill to swallow, but it's palatable versus $18 million for a Canton Street sidewalk project. So if we decided for some reason not to pursue this, it's going to be tough for the town to then decide, yes, we'll come up with 18 million one day. Again, God forbid something ever happened out there. So again, not to get way derailed here with the conversation, but it's a very challenging, going to be a process for sure. We want to make sure it's as inclusive as possible. And it really is an opportunity to get $18 million committed from the state. And hopefully there's some support behind it. You know, and I've said to some residents as well, it's really not necessarily my job to sell this. We're just presenting this to the public. And we really want to do it in a way that everyone understands that this is our one opportunity. And if we punt it, you might not get it back. So
Just a follow-up question. At one point, we had an update with respect to the 93-95 interchange development. None of this would be impacted by any potential plans of that 93-95 interchange improvement, right?
our current project, no, but John, if you want to comment more so maybe on the intersection down in Uni and Canton Street.
Yeah, so our project scope isn't impacted by that project per se, but we certainly have to account for the traffic redistribution that will occur as a result of that project. And we're working with MassDOT to obtain the necessary background documentation that was already performed for that other project to allow us to perform the correct analysis and appropriate design for the intersection university.
Yeah, that was the essence of my question, making sure that that was being accounted for. Thank you.
Joe, any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. And Todd already knows this, that Todd, I think you're doing a great job with the sidewalks in town. And for those that don't know, I sat down with folks before I decided to when I did decide to run. And I told Todd this, so it's not something new, but I was a bit surprised when I heard about the multi-use path on the Canton Street. And I told Todd, and I've told others, I'll say the same thing again. I'm going to reserve judgment till after the John, till after your public presentation to see what happens there. I'm just curious about a couple of things. One is having knocked on a few doors on that street and putting in that 10-foot multi-use path, is there any flexibility for the residents as far as hardships on that? And number two is just my own personal feeling. I don't think I could vote to support that. This came up fresh from the start to go across a neighbor's yard with a 10-foot path for a multi-use path. But that's just my 2 cents on it, Mary Ann. I just wouldn't do it to my neighbors.
Anything else that folks want to raise at this point? Hearing none, Todd and John, thank you very much for coming in with this update. We look forward to hearing more next week at the public forum. So thank you very much for keeping us updated and for your work on this.
All right.
Thank you.
Welcome. Look forward to seeing you guys then.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on our agenda, we now have the great pleasure of reviewing the recommendation of the selection committee for the appointment of Westwood's first ever Teen Poet Laureate. This is very exciting. And with us, we have, I believe, 2 members of the selection committee, Lizzie McGovern, our library director, and our poet laureate, Lynn Beatty. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
And just by way of very brief background for folks, at the April 11, 2022 Select Board meeting, the board authorized the library director to create and appoint the Poet Laureate Selection Committee to search for and recommend a Poet Laureate to serve as Westwood's first Poet Laureate. The primary goal of the Westwood Poet Laureate is to promote public awareness of poetry in town, to encourage reading and writing of poetry, conduct workshops for writers, write annual seasonal poems, and to help select and mentor the Westwood Teen Poet Laureate. The selection committee recommended Ms. Beatty for the role of Westwood Poet Laureate, and she was appointed to a 2-year term by the Select Board on February 27, 2023. And Ms. Beatty was tasked with helping the library director to select a Teen Poet Laureate. And we are delighted to have with us today the committee's selection, Lucy Seckler. Welcome, Lucy.
Hello, thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
I will just preface hopefully some remarks from you, Lynn, that in reviewing Lucy's application, the search committee appreciated the breadth of Lucy's many accomplishments, Model UN, chorus, theater among them, and the impressive quality of her writing sample, which demonstrates Lucy's careful crafting of language. And they were also impressed by Lucy's desire to deploy poetry as a way to bring the Westwood community together in celebration of the written and spoken word. Lynn, I'd love to just hear a few words from you about why Lucy is your selection.
Well, it was a very interesting process. Lizzie and I talked about what the criteria would be for a good Teen Poet Laureate. And we had to really hone this description because we opened it up not only to students at Westwood High School, but to students who live in Westwood, who go to other schools outside of Westwood. We got in touch with principals and English teachers at private schools, Catholic schools, and also students who live outside of Westwood but attend school at Westwood High School. So we really had a big pool in mind. Given that this was the first time around, we didn't have 150 applications, which is good, because we had certainly enough people to have a race. And in the end, I sat down with 3 of the finalists and spoke to each one of them and had them read their work to me so I could hear how they sounded when they read their work and talk to them about what their school workload looked like for next year, senior year or junior year or whatever year they were in. So it was not a quick process. And then everyone had to give us 2 references, and checking the references was very interesting. They all had good references, but Lucy's were out of the park. So that made our decision a lot easier. And Karen Michelson, who was on the Friends of the Library and herself is a published poet, was the 3rd person in the troika of selecting Lucy. But I think one of the things that came through with the recommenders was how diligent and reliable Lucy is. She follows through on everything, and that's really what we need. So she and I are going to sit down in the coming weeks to try to plan some activities, particularly for elementary school students involving poetry, because that's, and I'm really speaking for Lucy here, that's really her area of interest. And that's fine with me because my area of interest is middle school and high school, even though I like elementary school kids, but this will be a good division of labor. So really looking forward to working with Lucy.
Well, thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you all for your work on the committee and for bringing us such a wonderful selection for Westwood's first Teen Poet Laureate. I will entertain a motion on this. Oh, you're on mute, Rob.
My apologies. Hold on one second here. All right. I would like to make a motion for the select board to appoint Lucy Seckler to serve as the first Westwood Teen Poet Laureate for a term to end on June 30th, 2024.
I'll second the motion.
All right, roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Congratulations, Lucy. We're thrilled to have you as Westwood's first Teen Poet Laureate.
Thank you,
Mary Ann, can I just say one thing?
Please.
The way we framed this in all of the papers was, the application process, the stuff that was published was to say Youth Poet Laureate. So just, that, so if we could amend that, I don't know if you can, because that's where all the publicity had been in the past. And that's what Boston does. That's what Brockton does. That's what Springfield does. So I know in the past there had been some discussion, but
I will amend that motion to say Lucy Seckler will serve as the first Westwood Youth Poet Laureate for a term to end on June 30th, 2024.
thank you.
Thank you.
Is that seconded?
I'll second that. And I also wanted to say, Mary Ann, that Christine and I absolutely loved Suddenly Springtime. That was spot on. Absolutely loved it. Thank you.
Thank
That's
you so much. It's great to hear.
Best of luck, Lucy. We look forward to reading more of your poetry. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Next, we have the annual Run for a Vet, which is scheduled to take place this year on Saturday, May 13th at 10 a.m., beginning at Norwood High School. And do we have Mr. Henry with us?
No, he had a conflict and won't be in attendance.
Okay. Well, Mr. Henry is the coordinator of this year's race. And as you may recall, all net proceeds from this event will be donated to the Run for a Vet Fund, which aids local veterans and their families. Each year, the run honors a local military veteran. And this year, the run will honor Sergeant Edmund W. Mulvihill Jr. of the United States Air Force, who served as an interrogator during the Vietnam War and is currently the Director of Veterans Affairs for the town of Norwood. The race will be run in memory of Norwood native U.S. Army SPC Michael Mahoney, who passed away in 2006 at the age of 31. The goal of the race is to aid local veterans who are suffering financially, as well as promote the sport of running. And the Run for a Vet Fund has been able to donate funds for things like auto repairs, temporary housing for a military widow, job placement services, drug rehabilitation costs, and funeral costs. The 5-mile route for the race is mostly in Norwood, but it includes the following Westwood streets: Oak Street, Pond Street, Clapper Tree Street, and Winter Street. And Mr. Henry has been working with Officer Steve Conley on the details of the route. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Okay. I make a motion that the select board approve the 8th annual Run for a Veteran 5-mile road race to take place at 10 a.m. on Saturday, May 13th, beginning and ending at Norwood High School, with parts of the 5-mile race to come through Westwood, including Oak Street, Pond Street, Clapper Tree Street, Winter Street, and the approval is in conformance with any requirement of the public safety officer.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call, Joe,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you very much. We look forward to another great race going through Westwood. That brings us to approval of minutes for regular meeting minutes for our April 26, 2023 meeting. Rob, any changes or additions?
No, I had previously submitted one to Tish, so I know that got made, so none for me.
All right, I will entertain a motion and I will second it out of necessity.
Okay, I move that we approve the regular meeting minutes from the select board meeting on April 26, 2023.
And I second that motion. Roll call, Rob,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you. We
Mr.
will-
Privatera, just for the record, for the minutes, you recused yourself from that vote, sir?
Yes.
Understandably.
Excellent minutes, by the way.
Thank you both. All right, I think that brings us to public and press. Do we have any public and press? We have a question from Fran Fusco of 20 Pine Lane. Without a contract for 2 years, has this impeded the town's ability to hire experienced and certified candidates to replace those who have left the department? As you heard, we are actively negotiating that contract. I'm not sure that I can speak any further to that question. There is another question from Ellen Rawlings, 86 Green Hill Road. My understanding is that the fire department is looking for parity contract-wise with the police department, which is reasonable. What is the impediment to offering the fire department a comparable contract to what the town agreed on with the police department? Again, we are in active negotiation, and I'm afraid I can't comment further. Is there anyone else who wishes to do so?
Madam Chair, would you like us to just give a brief explanation of the process that we're in? Would that be helpful?
I think it would, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you.
Molly, would you like to just give an update to the board on the process, and for those who are not familiar with the mediation process in the JLMLC?
And actually, Chris and Molly. I'm hearing an echo. Could I interrupt you because I'm not sure where that echo is coming.
I think it's coming from Molly, but that's okay.
She's muted though. I just wanted to read the next question because it pertains to this. So this way, if you could both answer both of them, I think. The next question is from Kathy Wallace, 283 Farm Lane. Could you please clarify the statement of being close to an agreement with Westwood Fire Department in a week or so, as I have not heard that there has been sustainable progress? So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chris and Molly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if I start echoing, someone just wave at me. Just as a brief overview on the JLMC process, where the fire union had filed with the Joint Labor Management Committee with that is run by both staff and volunteers, both on the management side. So the first step in that process is called staff level, where in different rooms, staff from the JLMC come meets with the parties, and for all intents and purposes, those two mediators talk in the hallway. So talk to the management representative, the union talks to the labor representative, the two representatives, and we try to work out a deal. So that mediation was held April 20th. We had another session scheduled for April 27th. We proposals in between there. So, you're not, once you leave the room, you're not done working. We exchange proposals throughout that time.
Molly, I'm sorry, your audio is breaking up.
Okay. Chris, do you want to give the summary?
Sure.
Well,
So,
jump on a different place.
picking up where Molly left off. So on April 27th, so we continued to meet. We we were contacted by our mediator late afternoon of town meeting. We began around a little after 3 o'clock. We began working with our mediator at that point, and we continued on as outgoing chair Gotti mentioned to town meeting. We did continue to meet with the mediator on Tuesday. We also met with the mediator on Wednesday. We talked about a variety of different things, and we have now sent everything over through our mediator to the mediator for the union, and we're waiting to hear back. So the process, just to be clear, is some people may not understand. We are not speaking with members of the union, and the union is not speaking with us as part of the mediation process. Each side goes through a mediator, and there are times when the groups aren't even in the same building and may not even be in the same community when all this is going on. So the conversation, again, we're going through different people, so we're responding to the information that we received from our mediator. And I would think, and to try to answer some of the other questions, I feel anyway, that we have communicated in a positive way through the JMLC representatives over the last week, and greater than we have in months prior.
I switched to a different platform, so I think if I sound a little bit better, I just want to give kudos also to Chris and the chief. We really dropped everything Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of last week, blew up our whole schedules in order to work on this deal, working late into the day on Friday. And so we have given a very comprehensive proposal to the union, and we're hoping to hear back in the next day or so.
Great. There is one further question from Kathy Wallace. Why has Chief Deckers been participating in the contract negotiations? Is that standard procedure in other towns for the fire chief to participate in the negotiations? Was Chief Silva involved in the recent Westwood Police Department contract negotiations? Molly, do you want to take that one on?
Sure. Yes, it is a common practice. And yes, Chief Silva was involved at every step of the Westwood Police Department's contract.
Madam Chair, I'd like to expand on that response if I could.
Of course.
And also we had our DPW director and our assistant DPW director as part of the process when we were negotiating with the Public Works Department. So we do have the department heads for those representative groups in the room. We feel from a management standpoint, we feel it's important to make sure that it's part of the management team and the continuity of the management team when we're discussing proposals and hearing from the union. And it's been very successful with the other groups.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thanks for all who participated and for the questions. Seeing no other questions in the queue, I will announce that our next meeting is Monday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. via remote participation on Zoom. And with that, at this point, the Select Board will be going into executive session to discuss one issue pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for union personnel, specifically Westwood Permanent Firefighters Association Local 1994 IAFF, discussion of which in open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's negotiating position. The board will not be returning to open session. I will entertain a motion. Oh, you're on mute, Rob.
I'm unaccustomed to being on mute.
That's right.
I move that the select board move into executive session for the aforementioned reason.
Second,
Joe?
second.
Yep, a roll call.
Oh, aye, sorry.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Good night, everyone. Thank you.